What if I told you that the greatest prison most people live in has no walls, no guards, and no locks? It is the prison of letting other people's words, opinions, and moods control how they feel. The moment someone insults them, they collapse. The moment someone praises them, they inflate, and all the while they believe they are free. But true freedom begins the day you stop giving others the keys to your emotions and learn to stand unshaken, no matter what storms come your way. Every person carries an inner world that is as vast and complex as the universe itself. This inner world is filled with thoughts, emotions, intuitions, dreams, and images that give shape to who we are. It is the most sacred territory we possess, yet it is often the most neglected. Too many people wander through life unaware of how easily they have surrendered this inner space to others. They allow the shifting moods of a friend, the judgment of a stranger, the criticism of a colleague, or the approval of a crowd to dictate how they feel about themselves. In doing so, they hand over the keys to their most private kingdom, as though the self could be ruled by anyone but its rightful owner. Guarding this world is not an act of selfishness, but of necessity, for without this protection, you risk losing touch with the very essence of who you are. When you let others govern your emotions, you become like a leaf carried away by the wind. Someone frowns at you, and your mood sinks. Someone flatters you, and suddenly you are elated, but only for a moment, until another word shatters the fragile confidence. To live in this way is to live as a reflection rather than as a presence. It is to forfeit your true center and instead become a shadow cast by the ever-changing attitudes of others. The danger of such dependence is subtle because it does not always appear violent or cruel. Sometimes it hides behind the comfort of being liked, the relief of fitting in, the security of belonging. Yet if your peace is at the mercy of someone else's smile or frown, you are never truly free. Guarding your inner world requires vigilance. It demands that you recognize when your emotions are being pulled not from within but from outside. Imagine someone throwing stones into a still pond. Each stone disturbs the water, rippling its surface, but the depth beneath remains calm. If you forget the depth, you might believe the ripples define the entire pond, but the truth is that the stillness remains untouched at the bottom. In the same way, you must learn to live from the depth rather than the surface. The surface will always be disturbed by others, but your task is to remain rooted in the deeper stillness where no external hand can reach. This is not to say that you must ignore people or close your heart to the world. Life among others is unavoidable and necessary, for we grow in relationship, we are challenged through conflict, and we find meaning in community. But to guard your inner world means to stand firm in the knowledge that while others may influence your circumstances, they cannot rightfully own your emotions unless you grant them that power. The authority over your inner state belongs only to you, and when you reclaim it, you begin to discover what it means to live authentically. The tendency to let others dictate our inner climate often comes from a hidden hunger. We crave recognition, validation, and approval, believing that these gifts can soothe the emptiness we carry inside. The moment someone withholds them, we feel abandoned. The moment they give them, we feel complete. Yet this is a fragile and dangerous dependence because it builds your sense of worth on shifting sand. To guard your inner world is to break free of this cycle and to recognize that no praise can make you more valuable and no rejection can make you less so. Your worth is not at the mercy of another's perception, and your peace is not a gift that others can bestow or remove. There will always be forces that try to shape your emotions. They appear in the form of insults which try to wound your pride, or in the form of flattery which tries to inflate your ego. Both are equally dangerous if you allow them to penetrate unchecked. When you become aware of this, you begin to notice how often you are subtly manipulated by the words and actions of those around you. A careless remark can ruin your entire day. A small compliment can make you soar, but only temporarily. The problem is not the remark or the compliment. It is your willingness to let them hold authority over your emotional state. Once you see this, you realize that guarding your inner world means reclaiming this authority, refusing to be ruled by passing impressions, and returning to the steady ground of your own being. One way to strengthen this guard is through self-reflection. Instead of instantly reacting to the words of others, pause and ask yourself why they touch you so deeply. Why does criticism wound you? Why does praise lift you? Often the answer lies in hidden parts of yourself that remain unresolved. If you carry unhealed insecurities, then the slightest remark will strike them like a finger pressing into a bruise. Guarding your inner world does not mean building walls of stone. It means tending to the wounds within so they can no longer be so easily exploited. When you begin to heal these inner vulnerabilities, the control of others over your emotions weakens, and you stand more firmly in your own strength. Another way to guard your inner world is through cultivating an inner dialogue. Instead of listening only to external voices, learn to listen to your own deeper voice, the quiet intuition, the dream that surfaces at night, the subtle sense of right and wrong that emerges when you are still. This inner voice is often drowned out by the noise of the world, but it is the most trustworthy guide you have. The more you attend to it, the less power external voices will hold. For when you hear the call of your own depths, you no longer need constant confirmation from the outside. Guarding your inner world is also about recognizing the symbolic weight of emotions. When someone provokes anger in you, ask yourself, what symbol is being awakened here? When someone's words stir sadness, what memory or archetype is being touched? By seeing emotions as symbols rather than mere reactions, you shift your perspective. The insult is no longer just an insult, it is a mirror reflecting something hidden within. In this way, the power of others diminishes because you see them not as masters of your emotions but as catalysts for your own self-discovery. To protect your inner kingdom is to live with dignity. It is to claim responsibility for your own emotional life, to recognize that you cannot always control what others do or say, but you can always decide how to respond within. This awareness transforms your existence from one of dependence to one of freedom, from one of reaction to one of conscious choice. In that space, you no longer live as a puppet of circumstance, but as the author of your own inner state. Emotions are often misunderstood as enemies to be conquered or disturbances to be suppressed. Many people spend their lives trying to avoid difficult feelings as though anger, sadness, or fear were dangerous storms that must be locked away. Yet emotions are not obstacles to be overcome. They are messengers carrying truths from the deeper layers of the psyche. To treat them as mere interruptions is to miss the wisdom they offer. Every emotion that arises within you, whether joyful or painful, is a signal pointing towards something essential about your inner life. They are the language through which the unconscious communicates with the conscious mind, and if you ignore them, you cut yourself off from this dialogue. When you feel sadness, it is not simply an affliction, but a sign that something important is being mourned, something within you that requires acknowledgement. When you feel anger, it does not mean you are broken. It signals a boundary crossed, an injustice endured, or a hidden wound stirred. Fear is not always weakness. It can be a warning from the depths that something is out of alignment, that you are stepping into unknown territory unprepared. Even joy, which is easily accepted, carries meaning, for it points you toward what enlivens your spirit, what resonates with your authentic self. To dismiss emotions as irrational or inconvenient is to silence the messengers of your soul. Learning to see emotions as messages requires patience and humility. Instead of reacting blindly when anger flares or sorrow takes hold, you must pause and ask, "What is this feeling trying to tell me?" This simple question transforms the entire experience. The emotion ceases to be an enemy and becomes a guide. Imagine a dream in which a figure approaches and hands you a letter. Would you tear it up without reading? Of course not. You would open it to see what message it holds. Emotions are like those letters. They arrive suddenly, sometimes uncomfortably, but always with something to reveal. This perspective does not mean indulging emotions endlessly or allowing them to control your actions. It means listening with discernment. The messenger must be honored, but the message must be interpreted. For example, anger may signal that you have been wronged, but it does not demand that you lash out. It calls for recognition of the boundary crossed and reflection on how to protect that boundary in a way that aligns with your deeper self. Sadness may call for solitude or expression, but it does not require you to drown in despair. Joy may invite celebration, but it does not insist that you cling to it forever. Emotions speak, but you remain the one who chooses how to respond to what they say. One of the reasons people fear emotions is because they seem overwhelming, as though they arrive with a force too strong to contain. Yet this overwhelming quality is often the result of resistance. When you fight against an emotion, it grows stronger, demanding your attention in louder and more chaotic ways. Like a child who is ignored, it will raise its voice until you finally listen. But when you sit with it quietly, without judgment, the intensity often softens and the meaning begins to surface. By allowing emotions to be felt fully, without being ruled by them, you open the door to their wisdom. Dreams offer a parallel example. In dreams, emotions often appear as symbolic figures, a shadowy pursuer representing fear, a radiant figure representing hope, a chaotic storm representing turmoil. To interpret the dream, you must look beyond the surface and see what the figure symbolizes. Emotions in waking life are no different. They are symbols, dramatizations of your inner reality. By approaching them with curiosity rather than resistance, you begin to decode the symbols and learn what your deeper self is trying to communicate. Consider the common experience of jealousy. At first glance, it may seem like a destructive and shameful feeling, but when viewed as a message, it reveals a deeper truth. Jealousy often points toward an unacknowledged longing, a part of yourself that desires growth or recognition. To suppress it blindly is to remain ignorant of that longing, but to examine it is to discover a hidden aspiration that can be integrated into your conscious life. In this way, what seemed like a negative emotion becomes a doorway to self-knowledge. Emotions also carry collective significance, not just personal meaning. They are shaped by cultural archetypes and ancestral experiences embedded in the unconscious. When you feel fear of rejection, you are not only dealing with your individual insecurity, you are tapping into a universal human experience of exile and isolation. When you feel love, you participate in an archetype as old as humanity itself, the binding force that holds people together across generations. By recognizing that emotions are not only personal but also universal, you deepen your understanding of their symbolic nature. They connect you to something larger than yourself. Ignoring emotions, on the other hand, leads to inner fragmentation. What is repressed does not disappear. It sinks into the unconscious and exerts its influence in hidden, often destructive ways. The anger you refuse to feel may manifest as bitterness or illness. The sadness you suppress may turn into numbness, robbing life of its color. The fear you deny may become an invisible barrier, preventing you from moving forward. By refusing the messenger, you allow the message to rule you from the shadows. Only by acknowledging emotions openly can you integrate their lessons and free yourself from their hidden control. To embrace emotions as messages also requires honesty. It is tempting to label certain feelings as acceptable and others as shameful, but every emotion has a role to play. The inner world is like a symphony, and each note is necessary for the whole composition. To silence one instrument is to distort the music. Anger, fear, sadness, joy, longing, excitement, each carries a piece of truth that, when acknowledged, contributes to the harmony of the self. When you allow yourself to feel without judgment, you begin to hear the full music of your being, and in that music lies guidance for the path ahead. When emotions are honored as messages, they become teachers. They guide you toward healing, growth, and authenticity. They reveal wounds that need care, desires that need expression, and boundaries that need protection. They also reveal possibilities, showing you where your passions lie and what brings your life meaning. By learning to listen, you gain not only self-understanding but also resilience, for emotions no longer appear as threats but as allies in your journey. Awareness is the light that transforms unconscious reaction into conscious choice. Most people drift through life responding automatically to the words, moods, and actions of others without ever pausing to notice what is happening within themselves. A single remark can ignite anger, a dismissive glance can wound pride, a compliment can inflate the ego, and yet all of this occurs without reflection, as if invisible strings were being pulled from outside. In such a state, you live as though your emotions are not your own, but the property of anyone who knows how to provoke them. The moment you bring awareness into this process, the spell begins to break. To see your inner movements as they arise is to reclaim the power that was unconsciously surrendered. Awareness is not about controlling others or even about controlling emotions in the sense of forcing them into submission. It is about observing with clarity what stirs within you the moment life touches you. When someone criticizes you, notice the surge of heat in your body, the rush of defensive thoughts, the tightening of your chest. Instead of reacting blindly, you watch. When someone praises you, feel the expansion, the warmth of pride, the hunger for more, and simply notice. This act of noticing creates distance between you and the reaction. You are no longer fully identified with the emotion. You become the one who sees it rather than the one who is consumed by it. In that subtle shift lies freedom, for the observer is never controlled. Imagine walking through a forest at night without a lantern. Every sound in the darkness fills you with fear because you cannot see what surrounds you. Awareness is like lighting the lantern. The moment the light is present, the shadows lose their terror because you can see them for what they are. An emotion unobserved is like that unseen rustle in the dark, haunting you with its intensity. But when you turn the light of awareness upon it, it reveals itself as something understandable, even manageable. Awareness does not erase the emotion, but it changes your relationship to it. You cease to be a victim of it and instead become its witness. This is why ancient traditions often spoke of self-knowledge as liberation. To know yourself is not only to know your strengths and aspirations, but also to know your reactions as they unfold. Without awareness, you remain enslaved to patterns you do not even recognize. Perhaps every time you are ignored, you feel invisible and collapse inward, or perhaps every time you are challenged, you lash out with defensiveness. These patterns repeat endlessly until you finally notice them. Once seen, they cannot hold the same unconscious grip over you. Awareness is the first step to breaking the chain of repetition that keeps you bound. It is important to understand that awareness must be honest. It is not enough to say to yourself, "I am calm." when in truth you are seething with anger. To pretend is not awareness but denial. Real awareness means facing exactly what arises within you, however uncomfortable, without distortion or justification. It is like holding up a mirror to your inner world and refusing to look away. When you practice this honesty, even painful emotions lose their poison because they are brought into the light where they can be understood and integrated rather than hidden and festering. Awareness also reveals the gap between stimulus and response. In that small but vital space lies your freedom. A person may insult you, but if you are aware, you notice the sting without being driven instantly to retaliate. A person may flatter you, but if you are aware, you notice the ego's delight without becoming dependent on the praise. This space allows you to choose your response rather than being ruled by compulsion. Most people believe they have no choice in how they feel, but awareness shows that feelings arise and pass like waves, and it is possible to stand on the shore rather than being swept away each time. Another gift of awareness is that it gradually uncovers the deeper roots of emotions. For example, you may notice that every time someone dismisses your ideas, you feel a sharp pain of rejection. With awareness, you begin to ask, why does this wound cut so deeply? Perhaps it reminds you of a childhood experience of not being heard, or perhaps it touches an insecurity you have long carried. Without awareness, you would simply react, defending yourself or withdrawing. With awareness, you begin to understand the hidden story beneath the reaction. In this way, awareness does more than free you in the moment. It leads you toward healing and integration of the deeper wounds that give emotions their power. To cultivate awareness requires practice. It is not something that appears overnight, but a discipline you nurture day by day. Begin by noticing small things, the tension in your shoulders when stressed, the quickening of your breath when anxious, the warmth in your chest when happy. Treat each observation as a discovery. Over time, this habit of noticing extends naturally into more charged situations. You become capable of holding even strong emotions in awareness without losing yourself in them. Eventually, awareness becomes like a constant companion, a silent witness that allows you to live with greater clarity and freedom. Awareness also fosters compassion. When you observe your own emotions without judgment, you begin to see that others, too, are often caught in the grip of unconscious reactions. Their anger, pride, or fear is not always a deliberate attack. Awareness is the light that transforms unconscious reaction into conscious choice. Most people drift through life responding automatically to the words, moods, and actions of others without ever pausing to notice what is happening within themselves. A single remark can ignite anger, a dismissive glance can wound pride, a compliment can inflate the ego, and yet all of this occurs without reflection, as if invisible strings were being pulled from outside. In such a state, you live as though your emotions are not your own, but the property of anyone who knows how to provoke them. The moment you bring awareness into this process, the spell begins to break. To see your inner movements as they arise is to reclaim the power that was unconsciously surrendered. Awareness is not about controlling others or even about controlling emotions in the sense of forcing them into submission. It is about observing with clarity what stirs within you the moment life touches you. When someone criticizes you, notice the surge of heat in your body, the rush of defensive thoughts, the tightening of your chest. Instead of reacting blindly, you watch. When someone praises you, feel the expansion, the warmth of pride, the hunger for more, and simply notice. This act of noticing creates distance between you and the reaction. You are no longer fully identified with the emotion. You become the one who sees it rather than the one who is consumed by it. In that subtle shift lies freedom, for the observer is never controlled. Imagine walking through a forest at night without a lantern. Every sound in the darkness fills you with fear because you cannot see what surrounds you. Awareness is like lighting the lantern. The moment the light is present, the shadows lose their terror because you can see them for what they are. An emotion unobserved is like that unseen rustle in the dark, haunting you with its intensity. But when you turn the light of awareness upon it, it reveals itself as something understandable, even manageable. Awareness does not erase the emotion, but it changes your relationship to it. You cease to be a victim of it and instead become its witness. This is why ancient traditions often spoke of self-knowledge as liberation. To know yourself is not only to know your strengths and aspirations, but also to know your reactions as they unfold. Without awareness, you remain enslaved to patterns you do not even recognize. Perhaps every time you are ignored, you feel invisible and collapse inward, or perhaps every time you are challenged, you lash out with defensiveness. These patterns repeat endlessly until you finally notice them. Once seen, they cannot hold the same unconscious grip over you. Awareness is the first step to breaking the chain of repetition that keeps you bound. It is important to understand that awareness must be honest. It is not enough to say to yourself, "I am calm," when in truth you are seething with anger. To pretend is not awareness but denial. Real awareness means facing exactly what arises within you, however uncomfortable, without distortion or justification. It is like holding up a mirror to your inner world and refusing to look away. When you practice this honesty, even painful emotions lose their poison because they are brought into the light where they can be understood and integrated rather than hidden and festering. Awareness also reveals the gap between stimulus and response. In that small but vital space lies your freedom. A person may insult you, but if you are aware, you notice the sting without being driven instantly to retaliate. A person may flatter you, but if you are aware, you notice the ego's delight without becoming dependent on the praise. This space allows you to choose your response rather than being ruled by compulsion. Most people believe they have no choice in how they feel, but awareness shows that feelings arise and pass like waves, and it is possible to stand on the shore rather than being swept away each time. Another gift of awareness is that it gradually uncovers the deeper roots of emotions. For example, you may notice that every time someone dismisses your ideas, you feel a sharp pain of rejection. With awareness, you begin to ask, why does this wound cut so deeply? Perhaps it reminds you of a childhood experience of not being heard, or perhaps it touches an insecurity you have long carried. Without awareness, you would simply react, defending yourself or withdrawing. With awareness, you begin to understand the hidden story beneath the reaction. In this way, awareness does more than free you in the moment. It leads you toward healing and integration of the deeper wounds that give emotions their power. To cultivate awareness requires practice. It is not something that appears overnight, but a discipline you nurture day by day. Begin by noticing small things, the tension in your shoulders when stressed, the quickening of your breath when anxious, the warmth in your chest when happy. Treat each observation as a discovery. Over time, this habit of noticing extends naturally into more charged situations. You become capable of holding even strong emotions in awareness without losing yourself in them. Eventually, awareness becomes like a constant companion, a silent witness that allows you to live with greater clarity and freedom. Awareness also fosters compassion. When you observe your own emotions without judgment, you begin to see that others, too, are often caught in the grip of unconscious reactions. Their anger, pride, or fear is not always a deliberate attack. Awareness is the light that transforms unconscious reaction into conscious choice. Most people drift through life responding automatically to the words, moods, and actions of others without ever pausing to notice what is happening within themselves. A single remark can ignite anger, a dismissive glance can wound pride, a compliment can inflate the ego, and yet all of this occurs without reflection, as if invisible strings were being pulled from outside. In such a state you live as though your emotions are not your own but the property of anyone who knows how to provoke them. The moment you bring awareness into this process, the spell begins to break. To see your inner movements as they arise is to reclaim the power that was unconsciously surrendered. Awareness is not about controlling others or even about controlling emotions in the sense of forcing them into submission. It is about observing with clarity what stirs within you the moment life touches you. When someone criticizes you, notice the surge of heat in your body, the rush of defensive thoughts, the tightening of your chest. Instead of reacting blindly, you watch. When someone praises you, feel the expansion, the warmth of pride, the hunger for more, and simply notice. This act of noticing creates distance between you and the reaction. You are no longer fully identified with the emotion. You become the one who sees it rather than the one who is consumed by it. In that subtle shift lies freedom, for the observer is never controlled. Imagine walking through a forest at night without a lantern. Every sound in the darkness fills you with fear because you cannot see what surrounds you. Awareness is like lighting the lantern. The moment the light is present, the shadows lose their terror because you can see them for what they are. An emotion unobserved is like that unseen rustle in the dark, haunting you with its intensity. But when you turn the light of awareness upon it, it reveals itself as something understandable, even manageable. Awareness does not erase the emotion, but it changes your relationship to it. You cease to be a victim of it and instead become its witness. This is why ancient traditions often spoke of self-knowledge as liberation. To know yourself is not only to know your strengths and aspirations, but also to know your reactions as they unfold. Without awareness, you remain enslaved to patterns you do not even recognize. Perhaps every time you are ignored, you feel invisible and collapse inward, or perhaps every time you are challenged, you lash out with defensiveness. These patterns repeat endlessly until you finally notice them. Once seen, they cannot hold the same unconscious grip over you. Awareness is the first step to breaking the chain of repetition that keeps you bound. It is important to understand that awareness must be honest. It is not enough to say to yourself, "I am calm," when in truth you are seething with anger. To pretend is not awareness but denial. Real awareness means facing exactly what arises within you, however uncomfortable, without distortion or justification. It is like holding up a mirror to your inner world and refusing to look away. When you practice this honesty, even painful emotions lose their poison because they are brought into the light where they can be understood and integrated rather than hidden and festering. Awareness also reveals the gap between stimulus and response. In that small but vital space lies your freedom. A person may insult you, but if you are aware, you notice the sting without being driven instantly to retaliate. A person may flatter you, but if you are aware, you notice the ego's delight without becoming dependent on the praise. This space allows you to choose your response rather than being ruled by compulsion. Most people believe they have no choice in how they feel, but awareness shows that feelings arise and pass like waves, and it is possible to stand on the shore rather than being swept away each time. Another gift of awareness is that it gradually uncovers the deeper roots of emotions. For example, you may notice that every time someone dismisses your ideas, you feel a sharp pain of rejection. With awareness, you begin to ask, why does this wound cut so deeply? Perhaps it reminds you of a childhood experience of not being heard, or perhaps it touches an insecurity you have long carried. Without awareness, you would simply react, defending yourself or withdrawing. With awareness, you begin to understand the hidden story beneath the reaction. In this way, awareness does more than free you in the moment. It leads you toward healing and integration of the deeper wounds that give emotions their power. To cultivate awareness requires practice. It is not something that appears overnight, but a discipline you nurture day by day. Begin by noticing small things: the tension in your shoulders when stressed, the quickening of your breath when anxious, the warmth in your chest when happy. Treat each observation as a discovery. Over time, this habit of noticing extends naturally into more charged situations. You become capable of holding even strong emotions in awareness without losing yourself in them. Eventually, awareness becomes like a constant companion, a silent witness that allows you to live with greater clarity and freedom. Awareness also fosters compassion. When you observe your own emotions without judgment, you begin to see that others too are often caught in the grip of unconscious reactions. Their anger, pride, or fear is not always a deliberate attack. Much of what disturbs us in others is not purely about them, but about ourselves. The anger, arrogance, or selfishness that provokes us so strongly often mirrors qualities we have not fully acknowledged within our own being. This is why conflict with others can feel so personal, as if their behavior is not merely external, but somehow exposes something buried deep within. To understand this is to step onto the path of integrating the shadow, the hidden and unrecognized aspects of the psyche that we prefer to deny. Without this integration, we remain at the mercy of whatever others awaken in us, constantly pushed and pulled by the projections we cast upon them. The shadow is not evil in itself, though it often appears dark or threatening. It is composed of all the qualities, impulses, and desires we have rejected or repressed because they do not fit the image we prefer to present to the world. Perhaps we see ourselves as kind and so deny our capacity for cruelty, or we see ourselves as humble and so repress our pride, or we see ourselves as rational and so bury our irrational impulses. Yet these rejected parts do not disappear. They remain alive in the unconscious, waiting to be triggered by encounters with others. When we see in someone else the very trait we have disowned in ourselves, we feel an intense emotional reaction. Their arrogance awakens our repressed pride, their aggression stirs our hidden anger, their selfishness touches our own buried desires. The power of these encounters lies not in the other person's behavior alone, but in the shadow it awakens within us. To integrate the shadow is to recognize these reflections for what they are. Instead of blaming others for stirring emotions within us, we begin to ask what part of ourselves is being revealed. The colleague who frustrates us may not only be careless, but may also mirror our own neglected chaos. The friend whose confidence annoys us may not only be boastful, but may also reflect our unexpressed need to stand tall. Every strong reaction is an invitation to look inward, to discover what has been hidden from sight. This does not mean excusing harmful behavior in others, but it does mean taking responsibility for our own emotional responses, recognizing that they are shaped as much by our inner world as by outer events. The work of shadow integration is challenging because it requires humility. It is far easier to condemn others than to admit that what we despise in them also exists in us. Yet until we make this admission, we remain fragmented, living only from the parts of ourselves we are willing to see and rejecting the rest. This fragmentation weakens us, for the rejected parts do not vanish, they act from the shadows, influencing our behavior in hidden ways. A person who denies their capacity for anger may find themselves suddenly exploding in rage when provoked. A person who represses their desires may experience envy or resentment toward those who live more freely. By refusing to own these parts consciously, we give them greater power unconsciously. Integration does not mean indulging the shadow blindly, but acknowledging it, understanding it, and finding a healthy place for it within the whole of the self. Anger, when recognized, can become a source of strength to defend boundaries. Pride, when accepted, can fuel confidence and achievement. Desire, when integrated, can guide us toward passion and vitality. Every shadow quality contains energy that, if denied, becomes destructive, but if embraced, can become creative. The task is not to eliminate the shadow, but to bring it into the light, to see it clearly and allow it to serve rather than sabotage. The process of integration often begins with self-observation. Notice what qualities in others provoke the strongest reactions in you. Ask yourself why they disturb you so deeply. Beneath the irritation lies a clue to what you have disowned. Perhaps you are quick to judge arrogance in others because you fear becoming arrogant yourself. Perhaps you condemn selfishness because you were taught that your own needs were unworthy of attention. These judgments point to the edges of your own rejected self. By exploring them honestly, you begin to reclaim the parts of you that have been lost to repression. Dreams can also reveal the shadow. Figures that appear threatening, shameful, or disturbing often represent aspects of the self that have been cast aside. By engaging with these dream figures rather than rejecting them, you learn to welcome what they symbolize. In waking life, too, the shadow reveals itself through slips of the tongue, impulsive actions, or sudden moods that seem out of character. Each of these moments is an opportunity to look more deeply and to bring unconscious material into awareness. Integrating the shadow requires courage because it brings us face to face with parts of ourselves we would rather not see, yet it also brings immense liberation. When you accept your own anger, you are no longer controlled by the anger of others. When you acknowledge your own pride, you are less disturbed by the pride of those around you. When you embrace your own desires, you are less likely to envy those who live openly. The more you integrate, the less power others have to provoke and control your emotions, because you have already faced within what they stir without. The shadow also holds creative potential. Many artists, thinkers, and leaders have drawn their inspiration from parts of themselves that once seemed dark or forbidden. By daring to explore what was hidden, they tapped into a well of energy that gave birth to new forms of expression. In this way, the shadow is not only a source of conflict, but also a source of growth. It carries the raw material of transformation, waiting to be shaped into something meaningful once it is acknowledged. In relationships, integration of the shadow fosters deeper understanding. Instead of projecting your disowned qualities onto others and blaming them for what you cannot accept in yourself, you begin to see them as mirrors. This does not mean you must tolerate harmful behavior, but it allows you to respond with greater clarity and less reactivity. You recognize that the intensity of your response often says as much about you as it does about them. This recognition frees you from the cycle of projection and opens the possibility of genuine connection, where both light and shadow are honored without fear or denial. To walk the path of shadow integration is to walk toward wholeness. It is to gather the scattered parts of yourself and bring them into unity, to stand in the truth of who you are rather than in a partial image. In doing so, you reclaim the energy that was lost to repression and projection. You become less dependent on others to carry what you refuse to see and less vulnerable to their ability to stir hidden wounds. What once provoked you becomes an invitation to grow, and what once controlled you becomes a source of strength. There is within each of us a place untouched by the chaos of the world, a center that does not sway with the winds of opinion, the storms of fear, or the shifting tides of approval and rejection. To find this center is to discover a source of strength that no one can take away from you. Many people live as if they are leaves blown about by the weather of other people's moods and judgments. A harsh word makes them shrink, a kind word lifts them up, silence makes them uneasy, and attention fills them with excitement. Their sense of self drifts endlessly, depending on what comes from outside. Yet deep within, beneath all these surface movements, there exists a ground that does not move. To return to this center is to step into your true power. The center is not something you invent, it is something you uncover. It is there already, waiting behind the noise of thought and the turbulence of emotion. Most of us lose touch with it because we are so identified with the reactions of the moment. When someone disapproves of us, we immediately feel diminished, as if their view defines our worth. When someone admires us, we feel inflated, as if their praise has made us more valuable. Both are illusions. The truth is that your value does not rise and fall with the perceptions of others. The center knows this, but the restless surface self forgets. That is why the journey inward is so necessary. To return to your center, you must first be willing to stop chasing validation outside yourself. Imagine standing before a mirror and seeing your reflection change depending on who is looking at you. It would be absurd to think that your face shifts with every gaze, and yet this is how many live emotionally, altering their sense of self with every compliment, criticism, or glance. The center offers a different mirror, one that reflects you as you are, without distortion. When you rest in this inner space, you no longer crave constant reassurance because you have found a steadier ground than approval. The center is often discovered through stillness. In silence, in solitude, or in simple moments of reflection, the noise of external demands begins to fade, and you can hear the quiet pulse of your own being. It is like diving beneath the waves of the ocean. The surface may be turbulent, but a few meters below there is calm. In the same way, beneath the turbulence of emotion lies a calm awareness that is unshaken. You may sit in meditation, walk slowly in nature, or even pause for a few deep breaths, and in those moments you sense that you are more than the emotions that come and go. You are the depth in which they arise and dissolve. When you connect with this center, insults lose their sharpness because they strike only the surface. Praise loses its intoxicating pull because it too belongs to the surface. You begin to experience a subtle but profound freedom, the freedom of not being defined by what others think or say. This does not mean you become indifferent or cold. Rather, you remain open to others, but no longer enslaved by their judgments. You can listen, learn, and even be moved, but at the same time you remain rooted in your own being. The center is also a place of balance. Without it, you are tossed between extremes: elation when admired, despair when rejected, anger when opposed, fear when ignored. With it, you stand like a tree rooted in the earth. Winds may blow, storms may pass, seasons may change, but your roots remain firm. You can sway without breaking, bend without losing yourself, adapt without abandoning who you are. Balance does not mean lifeless neutrality. It means being alive without being unstable. It is the quiet confidence of knowing that nothing outside can truly make or unmake you. Returning to your center also changes how you relate to others. When you are rooted in yourself, you no longer seek to control them, because your peace does not depend on their behavior. You do not need them to speak kindly to you in order to feel whole, nor do you need them to agree with you in order to feel valid. This liberates not only you but also them, because you stop placing the burden of your emotional stability on their shoulders. You can love more freely when your love is not tangled with need, and you can listen more deeply when you are not secretly waiting for reassurance. The path to the center is not always easy because the surface self clings fiercely to its patterns. It wants to defend against every insult, bask in every compliment, and avoid every silence. But with practice, you can remind yourself again and again to look deeper. Each time you notice yourself swept away by reaction, you can pause and remember that there is a place within you that remains untouched. Each time you find yourself hungry for approval, you can turn inward and rediscover that your worth is not negotiable. Slowly, the habit of returning to your center becomes natural, and your life begins to flow from this deeper ground. There is a strength that comes only from knowing this inner steadiness. No matter how turbulent the world becomes, no matter how unpredictable others may be, you carry with you a sense of unshakable presence. This presence is not arrogance but serenity, not withdrawal but wholeness. It is the strength of being aligned with your own truth, of standing firmly in who you are without the constant need to defend or prove it. It is the recognition that nothing external can truly disturb what is eternal within you. And in this recognition lies the deepest form of freedom a human being can ever know. Many people spend their entire lives trying to shape, manage, or control the actions of those around them, believing that if only others would behave differently, they themselves could finally feel at peace. They demand respect, they chase admiration, they argue to win validation, and they cling to the illusion that their emotional well-being depends on how others treat them. But this endless effort to control what is outside creates only exhaustion, disappointment, and deeper entanglement. The truth is, no matter how much you try, you cannot dictate the choices, feelings, or perceptions of another. What you can master is your own response, your own state of mind, and your own inner world. To shift your focus from others to yourself is to reclaim the power you unknowingly give away every time you expect the world to rearrange itself for your comfort. Think of how much energy is wasted in the attempt to make others conform to your expectations. A friend does not call and you feel slighted. A colleague criticizes you and you want them to retract their words. A stranger looks at you harshly and you replay the moment, hoping they would see you differently. All of this stems from the same root, the belief that your sense of worth and peace depends on the behavior of another person. But the moment you understand that the only true territory you can govern is your inner landscape, the struggle begins to dissolve. Instead of bending the world to your will, you learn to strengthen your will to meet the world as it is. To release the need to control others does not mean you become passive or indifferent. It means you finally recognize the boundary between what is yours and what is not. Your words, your choices, your reactions, these are within your realm. Their judgments, their moods, their beliefs, these belong to them. Confusion arises when we cross this boundary and try to claim ownership over what is not ours. The result is frustration because life will not grant you mastery over another's mind. But when you respect this division, you discover a new kind of clarity. You no longer waste your strength on impossible tasks, and instead you pour it into the one arena where it can bear real fruit, your own inner state. This shift is liberating because it breaks the chains of emotional dependency. If your happiness relies on someone else speaking kindly to you, you will forever be at their mercy. If your calmness depends on others agreeing with you, peace will always be fragile. If your self-image rests on their recognition, then every moment becomes a negotiation for worth. But when you master your own emotions, you no longer stand like a beggar at the gates of others, waiting for them to grant you what you already possess. You begin to understand that dignity is not bestowed, it is lived. That peace is not given, it is chosen. That worth is not measured, it is inherent. Consider the futility of trying to control another's perception of you. No matter how carefully you craft your words, no matter how much you explain or defend, people will still see you through the filter of their own experience, their own wounds, their own limitations. To demand they see you as you wish is to fight a battle that cannot be won. Instead, the task is to see yourself clearly and live from that vision. When you know who you are, others may misunderstand you, but their misunderstanding no longer defines you. You stand rooted in your own truth, and that truth becomes stronger than any external distortion. Mastering your emotional world also requires the courage to face discomfort without fleeing into blame. When someone provokes anger in you, the untrained instinct is to blame them and try to silence or correct them. But if you pause, you will see that the anger arises within you, and its roots lie deeper than the moment itself. Perhaps it touches an old wound, perhaps it reflects an insecurity, perhaps it awakens a shadow you have not yet faced. By turning inward instead of outward, you transform the encounter into an opportunity for growth. You learn to hold the fire without letting it consume you, to witness the storm without becoming the storm. This does not mean allowing others to mistreat you. Boundaries are an expression of self-respect, not of control. You may choose to walk away, to refuse engagement, to set limits, but you do so from clarity, not from the desperate need to force them into compliance. Control is born of fear, while mastery is born of freedom. When you no longer seek to bend others to your will, your boundaries become stronger because they are not entangled with the exhausting struggle of domination. You act from strength, not from weakness disguised as force. There is a paradox here. The less you try to control others, the more influence you naturally carry. People sense the calm of someone who is centered, someone who does not react like a puppet pulled by the strings of every opinion. They may not always agree with you, but they feel the steadiness of your presence. And this steadiness, free of coercion, often inspires more respect and openness than any attempt at manipulation could achieve. Influence rooted in authenticity has a deeper reach than control rooted in insecurity. In the end, the work is simple, though not easy. Turn your gaze inward, reclaim your energy from futile battles, and choose to rule the kingdom within rather than chase dominion over the kingdoms of others. This shift may feel small, but it is revolutionary because it alters the very ground on which your life is built. No longer are you a prisoner of circumstance, forever pushed and pulled by the unpredictable behavior of others. You become instead the author of your own inner story, guided not by fear or need, but by the steady flame of self-mastery. In this lies the power to walk through the world free, unshaken, and whole. To live with true freedom is to stand in balance, untouched by the extremes that so often rule the human heart. Most people swing endlessly between highs and lows, exalted when they receive praise and crushed when they face criticism, inflated by success and diminished by failure, warmed by approval and frozen by rejection. They live like a pendulum, moving back and forth with every push from the outside world, never finding rest in the center. But the essence of mastery is to discover a place within where neither insult nor flattery, neither applause nor condemnation can shake your foundation. It is not about becoming stone, unfeeling and indifferent, but about cultivating a steadiness that allows you to respond to life with clarity instead of compulsion. When someone praises you, notice the way your heart leaps, the way the ego drinks in the affirmation like a thirsty traveler at a well. For a moment you feel larger, brighter, more significant, but ask yourself, has your worth truly increased because of a compliment? And when someone insults you, notice how quickly the fire rises, how words can pierce deeper than blades, how a stranger's voice can make you question yourself. Has your value truly diminished because of their perception? Both experiences are illusions, and yet people live as though these illusions define reality. True balance comes when you see through the mirage and anchor yourself in something deeper than the shifting gaze of others. This balance is not about detachment in the sense of withdrawal, it is about detachment from the chains of dependency. You can enjoy kind words without becoming addicted to them, just as you can hear harsh words without being broken by them. You can welcome recognition without clinging to it, and you can face misunderstanding without needing to erase it. In this state, you are free to engage with others more honestly because you are not bargaining for emotional survival in every exchange. You listen because you want to understand, not because you are desperate for approval. You speak because truth moves through you, not because you crave validation. Balance also means that you no longer live in constant reaction. Instead of being pushed into anger by insult or pulled into pride by praise, you remain steady like a mountain unmoved by passing weather. The clouds may gather, the rain may fall, the sun may shine, but the mountain remains. In the same way, when you are rooted in balance, the storms of emotion pass through you without destabilizing your core. This does not mean you suppress or deny emotion. Rather, you experience it fully while remembering that you are more than the passing waves. You are the depth in which the waves arise. It is in this balance that dignity is born. A person easily shaken by words lives at the mercy of the crowd. They may wear fine clothes, hold high positions, or speak with confidence, but beneath the surface they are fragile, always dependent on the approval of others. True dignity does not rely on external reinforcement. It shines from within like a flame that needs no fuel from outside. You carry yourself with quiet strength, not because the world applauds you, but because you know your value is not negotiable. Reaching this state requires discipline of mind and heart. You must learn to watch yourself carefully, to notice the small ways in which you are pulled off balance every day. A look of disapproval from a colleague, an unkind comment online, a forgotten greeting, all of these can stir the ego into restlessness. In such moments, you practice returning to center, reminding yourself that these things cannot touch the essence of who you are. At first it may feel like swimming against a strong current, but with persistence you discover that you can stand firm in the flow, unmoved even as the waters rush around you. There is also a deep peace that comes with balance, because you are no longer endlessly climbing and falling. The cycle of elation and despair, inflation and deflation is exhausting. One day you feel on top of the world, the next day crushed by a single word. To step off this cycle is to discover a calmer rhythm, one that does not depend on external circumstances. You begin to find joy in being rather than in being recognized, and strength in living authentically rather than in being approved of. This peace is not fragile because it does not rest on anything that can be taken away. Balance changes not only how you experience yourself, but also how you relate to others. When you are no longer controlled by the need for praise or the fear of rejection, you can meet people as they are without projection. You no longer flatter to win favor or argue to prove worth. You can let others have their opinions without feeling threatened, and you can offer your truth without demanding agreement. This creates relationships grounded in authenticity rather than in manipulation. You are no longer playing a hidden game of emotional exchange. You are simply present, steady, and free. This steadiness is perhaps the greatest gift you can give to yourself and to the world. For in a world where so many are tossed about by the winds of emotion, the presence of one balanced soul becomes a refuge. People sense the calm, the strength, the lack of hidden agenda. They may test it with words, they may challenge it with silence, but they come to recognize its unshakable core. And from that core radiates not cold detachment, but a deeper compassion, for you can truly see others only when you are no longer blinded by the need to control how they see you. Balance does not mean the end of growth, it is the ground from which growth can flourish, for when you are no longer enslaved by fear of judgment or intoxicated by praise, you can explore life more fully, risk more courageously, and love more openly. Nothing can bind you, because you have discovered that the chains of external control hold no power over the one who is rooted in their own being. And in that freedom lies the essence of true mastery in the end. No one can rule your inner world unless you hand them the power. When you choose awareness, when you return to your center, and when you release the need to control others, you step into a freedom that no insult can shatter and no praise can inflate. True mastery is not about changing the world around you, it is about mastering the world within you. That is where your strength, your peace, and your unshakable freedom will always be found.